Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Susan Berland. Welcome to our program on melanoma prevention. Let's give yourselves a round of applause for coming here tonight. It's my pleasure to co-sponsor this presentation tonight with our New York State Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman. We are using this presentation as a model for New York State. It's a model that will hopefully educate people on the dangers of tanning, on not going to tanning booths, being careful when you're outside, and it's just so important that we protect our skin and we protect our bodies and that we educate ourselves, our parents, our grandparents, and our children. This is going to be televised on the town's TV channel and will be available on the town's website within a couple of days from the presentation. The reason that I thought that this would be an important program is personally that I've been affected by skin cancer. I was the person who was out when I was younger with my record album with tin foil on it, tanning at the beaches, and I had my, SPF 0 on. Occasionally I would have a 15 maybe. And I really thought that, that I was, really cool getting a tan. The only problem was I never really tanned. I burnt, and I burnt, and I burnt. And now, years later, I am suffering the consequences of that and have had 8 different procedures to remove different chunks from me. And I can tell you that it's just not worth it. And there was a point in time where I felt that if I went to the tanning booth, I could get a nice base tan. And then when we were out in the sun, I wouldn't fry. Now, you would think that that makes sense, and I think that's what the tanning booth people want us to think. But the reality is there really is no safe tanning. So I went to the tanning booth, and my first bout with a skin cancer issue was my lower back, which was only visible in a tanning booth. Trust me on that one. So I really think it's important that I share my personal experience with each and every one of you so that you can feel free to use me as an example to anybody in your family or anyone who you care about who is even thinking of going to a tanning salon. Because like I said, there really is no safe way to tan. So let me introduce to you who our speakers are going to be tonight, and then we're going to start the program. First, I'd like to introduce to you from the AG's office, we have Charlie Silver. Where is he? Right here. Made the trip all the way from Albany in this rain, so thank you, Charlie. We have one of our sponsors. We have Paul Packer is here from Long Island Cares. And we also have Michael Haynes is here with us today from Long Island Cares, the Chief Government Affairs Officer. And they brought some donations with them. And for anybody who brought a food item to donate, there are boxes in the back for that as well. So we thank Long Island Cares for always caring about the people of Long Island. Yeah, see that? Name works. I like that. Okay, and then we also have our guest speaker, Meghan Rothschild, who is affiliated with the Melanoma Foundation of New England. There's Meghan right here. And we have somebody very near and dear to my heart. We have Dr. Phyllis Smith right here, who is an amazing dermatologist in Huntington and happens to be my dermatologist. So I can attest that whenever there's anything new on me, she finds it. So we're going to hear from her as well. And we're very honored to have our illustrious receiver of taxes, Esther Bavona, is here with us today. And at the end of the presentation, we do have lots of samples for you. We have suntan lotion samples and lip balm and UV detection bracelets. We have literature from the Melanoma Foundation as well as from Dr. Smith. And we have other suntan samples donated by a dermatologist, Susan Conate of Schwanger Dermatology Group. And a special thanks again to Long Island Cares. And the town senior division is also here, represented by Melissa Levitan, who has a table in the back with all the information that you might want to need from the senior center. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce to you our first speaker, Charlie Silver from the Office of the New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Charlie Silver is an environmental scientist with the AG's office in their Environmental Protection Bureau. Charlie initiated a consumer fraud case targeting 5 indoor tanning salons in New York. The indoor tanning parlors were making false and misleading health claims about the health benefits of indoor tanning. As a result of his scientific research, the Attorney General launched a tanning investigation and multiple lawsuits. Their legal actions resulted in the removal of false advertising and paid penalties. In his work as a watershed inspector general scientist and environmental scientist, Charlie has evaluated all types of environmental issues associated with protecting our drinking water quality. In 1986, Charlie earned his PhD in soil pollution, soil ecology from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Silver.
First, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Susan Berland for inviting me to speak to you this evening. She made that sound like I did everything, and I really didn't do everything at all. There were 3 bureaus, Consumer Frauds and Protection Bureau, the Environmental Protection Bureau, which I'm a scientist in, and the Healthcare Bureau. And the lawyers got together, and what we did was we started to look at some of the advertising that was being used by the indoor tanning parlors to bring in new customers. And by new customers, I'm talking about people who are in high school, people in college, and not to sound sexist, because that's not what this is, but it was primarily women, young women seemed to be the target audience. So our office, the Attorney General's office's interest in indoor tanning focused on what the indoor tanning advertising said. What was the allure to bring you in? And what we found was that some of the salons in New York were not only advertising how safe indoor tanning is, but also claiming that certain health benefits could be gained. For instance, some salons advertised indoor tanning could treat heart disease, asthma, high blood pressure, diabetes, and the list goes on and on. The most outrageous health claim we saw was that it cured cancer. This is indoor tanning curing cancer. Anyways, you would think that from all the different things we were reading that this was a miracle cure. So we looked into it, and we looked into the scientific literature, and again, we were targeting those tanning salons that had the most outrageous health benefit claims. We weren't picking on people who weren't doing that. It was just, and what we found was that basically all these claims were not supported in the scientific literature. So we went and we contacted them, and we basically had them remove all the health claims, and from their advertising, in some instances, we fined them for making false and misleading statements. From this investigation, we realized that the target audience for indoor tanning, as I said earlier, were high school and college students, particularly young women. In New York State, if you're 18 years old or older, you can indoor tan. If you're 17 years old with parental permission, you can indoor tan. This whole parental permission thing, I think, is crazy, but that's the way the law is, and I'm no one to challenge it. So basically, we decided that we should probably reach out to the same target audience that the tanning industry is reaching out to and try to let them know that much of what they're being fed by the tanning salons to get them in, get you into indoor tan, was probably unsafe, and you might be paying for it in the future. And I don't mean just paying for it out of your pocket, I mean paying for it in stitches. So basically, TJ Hatter from our office contacted Councilwoman Susan Berland and asked if we could schedule this presentation. She said yes. And basically, we then contacted the Melanoma Foundation of New England, and they agreed to send Meghan Rothschild here for this presentation. So let me give it back to you, Susan, and let the show continue.
Let me introduce to you Paul Packer, everyone. He's the CEO of Long Island Cares. Throughout his career, Paul's been committed to such causes as animal welfare, children, social action, disaster, and humanitarian relief and health. At the food bank, Paul's launched a veterans program, a storefront pantry in Freeport, a mobile pantry that delivers food to seniors and the handicapped, and a job development program to help break the cycle of poverty, just to name a few. The two of us have partnered with the holiday pet food drive that we do every year, and all the proceeds are donated to the Baxter's Pet Pantry at the Harry Chapin Food Bank and Humanitarian Center in Huntington. So Paul earned his Master's of Social Work at Adelphi University. He's an all-around fantastic guy, and let's hear a couple of words from Paul.
Thank you. I guess I should speak quickly about two things. First of all, Long Island Cares and our passion for our neighbors here on Long Island who are in need, 316,000 Long Islanders who struggle with food insecurity every single day, including 87,000 children. And our organization was founded by a person who lived in Huntington, and that was the late Harry Chapin, musician, songwriter, social activist. And we provide about 7.5 million pounds of food every year to more than 550 organizations, your soup kitchens, your food pantries, and so on, in addition to all our direct services, mobile outreach to veterans, to the homeless, to seniors, Baxter's Pet Pantry, and our food trucks. But I actually have something in common with Councilwoman Berland, and that I am an 8-time survivor of melanoma. Those of you who are young, that's when you get it. Living in Brooklyn, close to the beach, I was constantly going to the beach. Like the councilwoman, I just had this 3-part aluminum foil thing that, in those days, aluminum foil and baby oil got you the tan. And then I graduated like everyone else, because people who tan, crazy-like, are addicted to it. And when you start to go into the tanning booths, for me, it wasn't enough to go into the bed that looks like a capsule. That's okay, but there was also the cylinders that you could stand in, because then it'll give you a 360 tan, and then there are spaceship rooms where you lay on a bed, and there must be 8 to 10 different kind of lights, one bigger than the other, and it's supposed to tan you quicker. And so for me, 10 minutes in a tanning bed became 20 minutes, a half hour. Both my ears, my back, and my leg. And some of them, as the dermatologist will attest to, you get done in the office. It's called Mohs surgery. But when you have to go into an operating room and you're out, that's when they start to dig. And when you find melanoma, whether it's benign or worse, they have to dig it out of you. And that's not pleasant. So I try only to think about feeding the hungry and what I do for a living, and making sure that people who have dogs and cats that are going hungry get them fed. But with that, I'm really interested in staying and hearing the program, because I learn a lot every time I go into the community. So congratulations on this town hall forum, and thank you so much for involving us. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, now without further ado, we are going to watch a 5-minute video entitled 16-Year-Old Me.
Dear 16-year-old me.
Dear 16-year-old me.
Dear 16-year-old me.
Please don't get that perm. It's not as awesome as you think it's going to be.
You have to actually practice in order to learn to play guitar.
Whiskey tastes even worse on the way up.
Dear 16-year-old me, there's going to be a new set of Star Wars movies. Don't watch them. They ruin everything.
Dear 16-year-old me. This is where they took the cancer out. It was something called melanoma.
It's called malignant melanoma.
Malignant melanoma.
Malignant. That's not a very friendly word.
You'll be diagnosed when you're 28.
18.
36.
29.
22.
It's a tumor that starts in your skin cells, the cells that give your hair and skin color.
It's not just skin cancer.
Well, it is,
Well, it is.
but not just the...
Cut it out and it'll be fine kind, unfortunately.
It's the kind that you have to catch before it spreads.
Because it spreads so fast.
So fast.
To places like your liver,
Your lungs?
your brain.
Yours will be a really rare kind in your left eye, and that's when you'll find out.
That melanoma can show up on your tongue, the palms of your hands, and the soles of your feet.
Your doctors will tell you you're lucky that you caught it early.
Yours will tell you that you need aggressive treatment.
I'll have to tell you, it might take a year of chemotherapy.
And you'll need to do some of the injections yourself.
Dear 16-year-old me,
You're doing okay.
you're strong.
But there are some things I want you to know.
I wish I'd known.
That one bad sunburn before you turn 18.
Doubles your chances of developing melanoma.
That fair skin and red hair means that you're at a higher risk of getting it.
As if ginger people didn't have enough problems.
That you're at higher risk if you've got more than 50 moles.
And if you have a weakened immune system or a family history of skin cancer.
I want you to know the outlook is very good if we can catch it early.
But you have less than a 10% chance of surviving more than 5 years if we don't.
Dear 16-year-old me,
Spend more time with family. They mean everything.
If I had one piece of advice for you, don't start the tanning bed. I know you want a healthy glow, but it's going to double my chances of getting melanoma.
Sunscreen.
Yes, I agree. It's a huge pain in the ass, but so worth it. Please.
Your skin's like an elephant. It never forgets.
Dear 16-year-old me, helping spread this message is how you'll honor Glenna's memory. At 16, she's already an incredible lifeguard. She loves the sun and the beach and tanning, but she just doesn't know.
She'll be diagnosed when she's 22 and will lose her battle when she's just 26.
I want you to know, because it's melanoma that's going to take the strongest man you know, your best friend, and the love of your life.
Dear 16-year-old me,
Don't be afraid. This isn't about being afraid.
I want you to be aware
that melanoma is a young person's disease.
It is the second most common cancer in children and teenagers, and one of the most common in young adults.
And it can be deadly.
I want you to know you're not helpless.
This is a cancer that shows itself.
right there on the outside of you.
start checking your skin.
Please check.
Get to know your skin.
Get to know your skin.
Start checking your skin.
If a new mole shows up,
Or if when you have, starts to change color
Or size, or shape.
or feels different. If something seems out of place, get your doctor to have a look as soon as possible.
Know what to look for and get help. These are all signs your skin could be developing cancer.
You brush your teeth every day, maybe even floss,
Okay, we both know you don't floss.
but just once a month. I want you to check.
It takes 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Dear 16-year-old me, I do realize you're not actually going to see this, but someone else will, and it'll make a difference to them.
Dear someone else.
Dear somebody else.
If you're watching this,
send it to a 16-year-old you care about.
Send it to anyone who was once 16.
Or soon we'll be 16. Send this.
And check yourself. Educate yourself. You can download tools and information about melanoma here.
Share this link.
Tweet this link.
Post this to your Facebook.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Megan Rothschild, and I am from the Melanoma Foundation of New England. And if you can't tell, I had the honor of being a part of that video 6 years ago. I was the one in the turquoise shirt that you saw. And it was a really just kind of a side funny story. I didn't want to do that video because it required me to fly up to Toronto, Canada, and fly back in one day, and I'm not a great flyer, and my husband or my fiance at the time really encouraged me to go and be a part of it, and it ended up being one of the most shared ads of 2011, and it has over 10 million views. So I'm really grateful that I had an opportunity to be a part of that And I'm also grateful that I got to meet all of those people. It's a difficult video for me to watch because the young woman who's talking about having melanoma in her eye passed away 3 years ago, right after she got married. So it's hard for me to watch it and remember having conversations with her and hearing how hopeful she was that she was going to be able to pull through her diagnosis. And she lost her battle about 3 years ago. So as I said, I'm here on behalf of the Melanoma Foundation of New England, but don't get too used to that name. We are becoming Impact Melanoma on May 1st, which is going to be a national organization, and we focus on the prevention and early detection of melanoma. So we launched all of our programs nationally last year and decided that we needed to change our name to follow suit. So if you hear about Impact Melanoma, that's going to be our new name as of May 1st. So you're actually some of the first people to know our name. I got permission to tell you our new name. So I hope you feel a little excited about that. So I have been working with the Melanoma Foundation for about 10 years. And we have some awesome programs, some really great programs. First and foremost, we have our Your Skin Is In program, which I have been working as the spokesperson for many years, which focuses on talking to high school and college students about this disease. And it's a free curriculum that we do that's available to health teachers and science teachers. It's also a scholarship program for high school seniors and for college students as well. So any of you students, if you happen to be going into your senior year or going into college, there is scholarship opportunities available to you as well. We have the Skinny on Skin, which is another one of our free programs that's both available online and in person, and that trains beauty industry professionals on how to spot suspicious-looking lesions on their clients. So it's another great program that we do for hairstylists, massage therapists, estheticians, talking to them about how to be able to detect melanoma and skin cancer. Our Practice Safe Skin program is our sunscreen dispenser program that we have, and that is an opportunity to provide free sunscreen to your community. So we have those all over the country, and then we also offer support through our Billy's Buddies program. It's just to give you a little overview of who we are. So like I said, I started working with the Melanoma Foundation about 10 years ago. I am going to go through my story and talk to you about my personal experience and why I got involved with the organization in the first place. So my story starts when I was 17 years old. Much like any other teenage girl or some teenage girls, I had a lot of insecurities. And as you heard him say in the video, as if gingers didn't have enough problems, I hated having red hair. I hated having fair skin. I hated the fact that my friends could go to the beach in the summer and get a really nice tan, and I would either burn or get nothing. So how many in here have had a sunburn? Pretty much everyone, right? Yeah, so it's kind of like a rite of passage, unfortunately, particularly in states where we have winter months, because once the summer hits, what do we want to do? We want to be outside. So I'm from Massachusetts originally, and I was talking to a family friend many years ago who recommended that because I could never achieve a tan outdoors, she said I should start using indoor tanning beds. And she was a nurse at the time, but she told me that, you know, it was a really great controlled environment to get vitamin D, and it was a safe way to get a tan, to achieve a tan. So how many in here think that sounds weird, that a nurse would tell me to use tanning beds? Right. So this was over a decade ago. This was actually 15 years ago. So we didn't know as much about tanning beds as we know now. So I took her advice, and I decided to start using indoor tanning beds. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and I became addicted to tanning. And I believe it was Paul who mentioned, or maybe was it Charlie or someone, or Councilwoman, someone said about the addictive qualities of tanning. And I can tell you that that's absolutely accurate. I was finally able to achieve a tan from tanning beds. I loved having that glow. I was totally addicted to that feeling. So I kept up that behavior, and I would go about once a week for 20 minutes was usually my max. A lot of people who use indoor tanning salons tend to go a little bit more than once a week, but that was kind of my norm. So I went off to college at Roger Williams University. It's in Rhode Island. It's a beautiful campus located right on the water. So having done the whole tanning bed thing, I finally had a tan. I stopped using sunscreen. You were hearing stories of people laying out with aluminum foil. Well, we would go out and sit by the water. We'd do our homework. We'd read our books, and we just would sit there in a bathing suit with no sunscreen. So I noticed during my sophomore year that I had this mole on my stomach. So the reason I noticed it is because I would find myself itching the area. So I would be in the shower and I'd notice my hand was kind of itching this area, or I'd be laying in bed at night before falling asleep and I'd be itching my stomach. And so I thought that was kind of strange, but being 19 and in my sophomore year of college, I really didn't think too much of it. But I did think enough of it that I decided that the next time I went to my doctor's office for my regular checkup, I was going to bring it to her attention, to someone's attention. So I went home, my sophomore year break, the winter break where you have December and January, part of it off for Christmas, and I went for my regular checkup, just like you go when you see your doctor once a year, and you get your shots, and you talk to them about your health, and they do an exam. And I walked in, and I said, "What do you think about this mole on my stomach?" And she looked at it, and she said, "I think it looks fine." I said, I don't know, I have this weird feeling about it. It's itching, it's really dark, it's starting to get really dark, it's like jet black. She said, well, I guess we could have it removed, but I don't recommend it because then you'll have a scar and you don't want to go through all of that. But for whatever reason, even though that's what we want to hear when we go to the doctors, right? We want to go in, the doctor says, you look great, you're healthy, that's normal, that's what we want to hear. But for whatever reason, at the age of 19, I said, I'm not leaving until you write me the referral to have the mole removed. So she finally agreed and sent me along my way. And about a week later, I went in to have the mole removed. I went to a plastic surgeon. Wasn't a dermatologist, which is a little weird. It's not the norm, but I went to a plastic surgeon and had the mole removed. And just to kind of put my mentality into perspective, I drove directly from that appointment to the nearest tanning salon. And I remember that because I was in a stand-up booth, and I remember looking down thinking, oh, you're gonna have a weird tan line from the steri strips, which are those little, steri strips are those little adhesives that kind of keep your incision closed. That's where my head was at the age of 19. I'm like, nothing bad's ever gonna happen to me. I'm invincible. All I worry about is that I'm gonna have this funky tan line from these steri strips. So about 2 weeks later, actually about a week later, I went back to the doctor's office to have stitches removed, and ironically enough, it was the first time I had ever had stitches. I had never fallen and bumped into something. I had never, needed any stitches for any other reason. So I went to the doctor's office, and my parents were on vacation. They had gone to Cape Cod for the weekend, and so I went by myself, just thinking I was getting stitches taken out. And this doctor comes in, and it wasn't even the doctor who had performed the initial surgery. And he comes in, and I remember very clearly he had on his lab coat, and he had a clipboard with him. And he walks in, and he looks down at the clipboard, and he looks up at me, and he says, "Is there anyone here with you?" And I said, "No, it's just me. I'm just here to get some stitches out." And he kind of paused, and he goes, "There's no one in the waiting room I can go get?" And I remember at that moment thinking, something's wrong. I had just turned 20. I think it was like 3 days after my 20th birthday. And I was like, okay, what's going on? What's up? And I said, no, I'm here by myself. I'm sorry, there's no one here. I didn't think I needed parental guidance to get stitches taken out. And he said, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this when you're here alone, but you have melanoma. Now imagine being 20 years old, maybe some of you are, maybe some of you are close to 20, and this doctor who you've never met before starts saying things like, especially you ladies in the front, 20 years old, 21, 22 maybe, he starts saying things like melanoma, cancer, survival rate, lymph node extraction, and the only thing I could think of was, you're an idiot, you did this to yourself. It was at that moment that I knew that my choices, starting at the age of 17, had brought me to a melanoma diagnosis. Before I was even of legal age to vote or buy cigarettes or drink alcohol, I had been making decisions that had now led to a cancer diagnosis. The next month was a whirlwind. So I was going to school at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island, but I was from Western Massachusetts, so I was driving back and forth, about a 2-hour drive, every couple of days to have doctor's appointments, blood tests. I had to meet with every doctor under the sun to talk about what the steps were for surgery. I had to meet with an oncologist, because what happens is and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but melanoma is the deadliest form of skin cancer. It's a deadly form of skin cancer. And what happens is it actually travels inside the body, grows deeper into the skin, gets picked up by lymph nodes, and then lymph nodes bring those cancer cells to surrounding organs. So what happens is it metastasizes inside your body. And there's a big misconception sometimes when we talk about skin cancer and melanoma that it's something that you just get cut off and you move along with your life. And that's not always the case. So for me, in order to make sure that my melanoma had not spread, they booked me for surgery. I was in there about 3 to 4 weeks right after the initial diagnosis. And they had to, first and foremost, do a radioactive dye injection to figure out where. So what they do is they inject this, I swear it was glowing green. It was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It really wasn't, but it was one of the most painful experiences of my life. They inject this radioactive dye into the area around where the mole was located, and then they put you under a screen to see which lymph nodes pick up that dye. And whichever lymph nodes pick it up, they could potentially have cancer in them. So they go in and they remove those lymph nodes. So they, first and foremost, they did that to me. Then they got me prepped for operation. They brought me in and they did what they call clearing the margins. So when you have melanoma, they go in, they cut a huge chunk of skin out around where the mole was located, and they send all that skin for biopsy to make sure that there's no melanoma or cancer cells that have kind of gone outside of the mole area. Additionally, they had to take 7 lymph nodes from under my left arm and 1 from under my right. And they removed a severely dysplastic, which is potentially cancerous, potentially not, one from my arm, one that they thought looked suspicious. So I woke up and they hadn't really understood how many lymph nodes they were going to need to take and how much area of skin they were going to need to take. So this picture that you see up here is what they refer to as drainage tubes, and I apologize if anyone has a weak stomach, feel free to look away. So I woke up and I had this netting kind of all the way up to my neck. And I always, if anyone's ever had surgery, I love when they talk to you when you're fresh out of surgery and then they leave and you're like, what? Did I hallucinate? Was someone in here? You know, you have no idea what's going on. So they basically had come in and they explained we had to sew drainage tubes into your incisions and you're gonna have to empty them every 3 hours for the next 3 days. Because when you have this type of surgery, you can have lymphatic fluid build up and you can have complications that could potentially inhibit you from healing properly or get infected. So I remember kind of, every day, every 3 hours for the next 3 days, waddling over to the sink and figuring out a way to empty these drainage tubes that were in my incisions. But that wasn't as traumatic as thinking like, how are they going to get these drainage tubes out, right? Because they're not going to reopen my incisions because that's really going to screw up the healing. So how are they going to do this? So about 3 days later, I went in for my post-op, and it was with the doctor who had performed the surgery. He had terrible bedside manner, not someone who I saw again after this appointment because I walked in with my mom, and he sat me down on the table, and he started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, well, this is going to hurt. And I said, what's going to hurt? And he put his hand on my stomach to brace me and pulled the tubes out of the incisions. No warning, no discussion. So what's really important to know is that when we talk about skin cancer, it's not just skin cancer. It's something that's really serious, and it's something that's painful and very traumatic, particularly for someone who's 20 years old going through something like this. So for me, they had sent all the lymph nodes for biopsy. They sent that big chunk of skin that they took out for biopsy. And luckily for me, my melanoma had remained at a stage 2. So that means it had grown a little bit deeper into the skin, but it hadn't made its way to the lymph nodes and definitely hadn't made its way to an organ. So there's 4 stages, and then there's all sorts of stages in between, 3A, 3B, things like that. And obviously with any cancer, the higher up in stage you are, the less likely your chance of survival. But what we know about melanoma is that when it's caught early, it can be curable. So that's a really important thing, and one of the biggest reasons why we go out and talk to people about prevention and early detection, because it's all about detecting it early. So what you see up here on your right, the brown picture, is a picture of of my skin under what we call a facial scanner. And this is showing you all those brown spots, every freckle, everything that looks like a freckle, all those, even though when they're merging together, I look like one giant freckle, right? That's all irreversible damage that I did to myself starting at the age of 17. So we know that any type of exposure before the age of 18 is going to dramatically increase your risk of skin cancer. And it's really frustrating for me to see this because now I lead a pretty healthy lifestyle. I wear sunscreen on a regular basis. I eat healthy. I work out. I do all of those things. And there's nothing I can do to kind of turn back the hands of time. So as you saw in that first video, the woman said, your skin is like an elephant. It never forgets. So the tan fades, but the damage doesn't. So I have had since then, that was 13 years ago that I went through that surgery. And since then, I've had over 40 additional surgeries. So still, knock on wood, never had stitches except for mole extractions. And I promise I do things. I go out of my house and play volleyball and do all sorts of things. But I've never had stitches for any other reason other than to have some minor surgeries. So what they do here is because once you've had melanoma, you're at a greater risk to get it again. So you have to be careful. You have to be really diligent. And you have to check and see if there's spots changing on your body. And we're going to talk about the warning signs. So here they see something, the dermatologist sees something that they don't like, they numb me up and they take a razor and they shave a chunk of skin off. If it comes back as what they call severely dysplastic or precancerous, they go back in and cut a larger area. So I've never had any other skin cancers or melanoma, again, knock on wood, but I've had 40 of these procedures, if not more than that. I'm covered head to toe in scars. So it's really always ironic to me because I think about how when I was 17, all I wanted to do was have nice skin. And now my body's like, oh yeah? Is that what you wanted to do? I'm gonna scar you up from head to toe. So it's just not worth it. It's not worth knowing that 2.5 years of putting my skin through this has now led to getting a mole excised pretty much almost every time I go into the dermatologist, which is now once every 6 months. After my initial diagnosis, I was seeing a dermatologist every other month, so 6 to 7 times a year. So like I said, luckily for me, my melanoma had remained at a stage 2, and I have not had any reoccurrence since. It's been 13 years, so that's a really great sign. Once you hit that 10-year mark, it's always something to celebrate. But now I work for the foundation, and I come out and I talk to groups such as this about the dangers and the warning signs. So like I said before, melanoma is the deadliest form of skin cancer. But we know that if it's found early enough, it can be treated and can be cured. It can be fatal, though. It can spread to surrounding organs, like I talked about. And what is sometimes challenging is if people have metastasized melanoma, that means that the melanoma has perhaps gone to an organ like the liver, the brain, the lungs. And a lot of people think that it switches, and oh, he or she is battling brain cancer, or he or she is battling lung cancer, when it's metastasized melanoma to the lung, metastasized melanoma to the brain. And that's another reason why we have this misconception that skin cancer is not a big deal, when in reality it is. So everyone is at risk, unfortunately, when it comes to melanoma. I have a lot of people who talk about, oh, I tan up easily, or I have a darker complexion, or I'm Italian. I could never get skin cancer. And that's unfortunately just not the case. This is a disease that affects all different, it affects everybody. But there are some risk factors that will put you at a greater risk. So the first one is UV exposure, both from indoor sources like tanning beds and outdoor. And that's controllable, right? We can control our UV exposure. We can wear sunscreen regularly. We cannot go into tanning beds. But the greater your UV exposure, the more you put yourself in the sun or in tanning beds, the higher your risk of skin cancer. Number of moles on the skin. So if you just happen to be someone who has a lot of moles or is more prone to freckling, it means your skin does not love UV. And it does put you at a greater risk. Your skin type. So yes, it is true that fair skin, light hair, light eyes, lighter complexion is at a greater risk. But again, it's a disease that affects all different skin types. In fact, Bob Marley actually died of melanoma, for those who don't know that. He had melanoma on his toe, and it metastasized, I believe, to his brain. And so, it can affect all different skin types. And then finally, family history. So if anyone in your family has had Skin cancer, melanoma, basal cell, squamous cell, that automatically puts you at a greater risk. You know, the close family, so a sibling, parent, grandparent, it does put you at an increased risk. So there is a genetic component to melanoma and whether or not you're genetically predisposed as well. So those are the basic risk factors. So we talk a lot about this, about why we're out here, why we're out talking to everyone. So it's an important thing to know that melanoma is the second most common form of cancer for young people ages 15 to 29. So this is not what some people refer to as an old person's cancer. You're going to hear another video that I have where someone says that, and it's not the case. Melanoma is really prevalent among that 15 to 29 age group, particularly among females, like Charlie had mentioned when he came up here to chat. Additionally, New England and kind of the Northeast region has higher than average rates of melanoma, and the reason for that is because of intermittent exposure. So we talk about the winter months and how we all kind of hibernate and hide out, and then during the summer months, we're out there getting our burns and our tans and going to the beaches, and the skin does not love that intermittent exposure. Places like Florida, Southern California, Texas, we see higher rates of basal cell, which is the most common form of all cancers. So it's interesting for people to see, like New England area, why does that have higher than average rates? And it's because of that intermittent exposure. So there is no such thing as a healthy tan. And I believe the councilwoman said that as well when she came up here. There's just no healthy way to get a tan. In fact, a tan is your body's response to DNA damage. That's what's happening when you're getting a tan, is your skin is putting up a shield asking you to stop what you're doing. It's trying to protect itself. It's our body's largest organ. It needs to be protected and taken care of. And again, just to reiterate, I know that Charlie and Councilwoman have already mentioned this, but tanning beds are completely unsafe. In fact, they are just as cancer-causing as cigarettes. The World Health Organization declared that a few years ago, I think almost 10 years ago, or maybe 7 to 10 years ago. They are carcinogens. They are just as cancer-causing as cigarettes, and they're not safe. They emit 3 to 6 times the UV radiation of the sun. So how can you protect yourself? Well, first and foremost, you can avoid sunburns and tanning. I think we've talked ad nauseum about that. You can avoid peak hours of the day. So we know that the sun is at its strongest between hours 10 and 2. So seeking shade, we're not asking anyone to hibernate and not go out of your house, of course, but make sure that you're being smart about it and seek shade when you can. Wear protective clothing. So a t-shirt is about a 5 SPF, but you can actually buy clothing that is a 40 SPF. You can buy detergent that turns your clothing into a stronger, they call it UPF, but we'll just say SPF for the sake of this discussion. So there's ways that you can build sun protection right into your clothing. You want to be wearing an SPF that says 15. So 15 is for like your winter months when you're literally just running from your house to your car. 30 is where you want to be, and you want to be reapplying that sunscreen every 2 hours. So that's what's key. A lot of people will say, what's the bare minimum that I should be using for sunscreen, or what's the max I should be using? You should be using a 30 minimum, and it's really more about the reapplication because your skin absorbs it. So you have to reapply every 90 minutes to 2 hours to be fully protected. And you want to check your skin monthly. See a dermatologist on an annual basis, or talk to your primary care physician if you don't have a derm. Make sure that they're doing a skin exam. We always recommend seeing a dermatologist because they're experts. They know what to look for. But you should know your moles, and you should know what to, if something's changing. Speaking of that, the warning signs of melanoma. So first and foremost, these are not, you don't have to have all of these warning signs to have something be potentially cancerous. So if you walk away tonight and you forget everything I said, at the very least, remember this. And we have cards in the back for you when you leave. So if you have a spot on your body that's asymmetrical, meaning if you were to draw a line down the middle of it, fold it in half, if it wouldn't line up, that's a cause for concern. Border irregularity. So any spot that you have on your body that has kind of weird scalloped or notched edges, it's not a perfect circle, there's maybe a piece of the mole that's kind of going off in its own direction, doing its own thing, that's a cause for concern. That's something you'd want to point out to a doctor. C is color variation. So melanomas can be brown, black, they can even be blue, red, anything that has two-tone. So if you've got a spot that's half brown, half black, color variation, it's not a nice solid color throughout, that's something you'd want to keep an eye on. D is diameter, so anything that's larger than a pencil eraser. is something you'd want to have a dermatologist or a doctor take a look at. And then E is evolution, and this is the one that we at the Melanoma Foundation think is the most important. So you could have had a spot for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and maybe it was fine. But if it starts to change, starts to grow in size, starts to get darker, that's something you would want to have a doctor look at. If it starts to itch, bleed, not heal properly, if you have a new spot that shows up, all of those are cause for concern. So you have to really pay attention to your skin, and trust me, I know it's all over the place. It's a lot to pay attention to. So talk with your doctor about that. So real quick here, just like I mentioned, we have our Your Skin Is In program that is a free curriculum that high school students can use. It's also a scholarship program, and it's also for colleges as well. So if you are looking to bring this message back to your school, we have a free way to do it right online, and you can also apply to become a Your Skin Is In ambassador at your school and enter to win a scholarship. So I'm just gonna play this one last video here for you. And the reason that I play this video is because, so I got up here and I shared my story, but maybe it didn't resonate with you. Maybe it's not a story that you can relate to. But there's lots of other stories out there. And so this video talks with other survivors. I am also in this video. I don't want you to do a double take and think, what the heck's going on? I had the honor of being in this video as well alongside these other survivors. But I wanted to share it with you so you could have another perspective.
This was my favorite place to go.
Down the Cape.
Along the banks of the Charles.
Right here on Hampton Beach.
I used to go every day.
A whole month at my friend's Narragansett Beach house.
And all summer long.
In my parents' backyard.
The pool. All the time.
And this is where I was exposed.
This is where I would lay out.
This is where I would go 3 times a week.
And here.
This is where I used to tan year-round.
And here?
Here.
Here.
And here
is where the melanoma first appeared.
Here is where my melanoma first appeared. Doctor said that I had a 50% chance of living 5 years. That's pretty scary to hear, you know.
And the doctor, he said, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this when you're here alone, but you have melanoma.
When I heard the word melanoma, I thought...
Shocked. I was sick to my stomach.
I think the room went silent.
Ugh. My next thought was, oh my God, how bad is this?
I was just in full-blown hysterics.
Andy was crying, we were crying.
I was scared.
Really scared.
I was only 19.
21.
20.
I'm 16 years old, and I have melanoma.
My biggest fear that whole morning after I'd heard the news was then having to deliver the news to my mom and the rest of my family.
Of course, any parent's fear. They want to be able to watch their kid grow up.
He lost his battle on August 4th, 2009, age 27.
I just felt horribly guilty saying something that I've done for the last year has brought this on, and now we all have to deal with it.
That was the beginning of a very long, long road.
Everything started with 3 major surgeries.
The surgeries were petrifying.
Took out a big chunk of skin around where the melanoma was located.
This long, stitches like this, inside and out.
These drainage tubes coming out of my incisions.
It had spread from his pancreas to his liver.
It felt like I had the flu for 12 months. It was not fun.
No tan is worth going through what you have to go through when you're diagnosed with melanoma.
Did I intentionally seek out tanning? Yeah.
When I was 17, I desperately wanted to have a tan and started using tanning booths.
I started tanning in freshman year of high school for the prom and winter ball, and by the time I was a junior, I was going 3 to 4 times a week.
I am very light-skinned, I have light hair and light eyes, and I just loved the way that looked against a nice little golden brown tan. It was stupid. I knew better. I knew better.
I wouldn't say I was ever really out in the sun intentionally, but just outside a lot. Playing golf, sailing, surfing, you know, a ton of exposure to my arms and back of my neck.
I was willing to put my body through whatever it would take to get that glowing tan that I wanted.
I'm Italian. I've never burned. I can't get melanoma
I just thought that melanoma was an old person's disease.
I thought that tanning myself was a much better alternative to getting the blistering burns that I used to get in my younger teen years.
There is no such thing as a safe tan indoors or outdoors.
Well, now that I've had melanoma, I know I'm at a greater risk to get it again. You know, it's not a cancer that you can have, get over it, and not think about it. It's something that I have to think about on a daily basis.
I worry and do things that none of my friends have to worry or think about.
I'm constantly fearful of getting another melanoma or melanoma coming back.
It's not just a little something, it's a big something.
Protecting yourself from melanoma is easy.
You're never going to keep people out of the sun.
Wearing a hat, bringing an umbrella.
Once I go in the water, I reapply sunscreen. I try to stay out of the sun in the peak of the day.
And seeing a dermatologist once a year to get a regular skin check.
Early detection is extremely important. It's what saved my life.
So doing all the little things along the way really is what can make a difference.
Your skin is the largest organ in your body, and the bottom line is that it's beautiful the way it is. Don't take it for granted. Your skin is in. So again, I just wanted to share that video with you so you had some alternative perspective and hear some other stories. So I want to take a moment just to thank Councilwoman Berlin and Charlie and the New York Attorney General's office for having us out here. We just so appreciate being a part of this. And I'd love to pass it off to Dr. Smith, if that's, you want, oh, Councilwoman, you want to come up? Thank you all so much.
Let's have a round of applause for Meghan for sharing her story. Well, our final speaker is someone who's very, very special to me, very important to me, my dermatologist. And I will share with you that I was just there yesterday and have 7 stitches in my side. And she did a great job, and I'm here tonight at this program because it's just so important to me. She is, an amazing doctor, and I go every 3 months to get checked, and have had, lots of scars. But she's the kind of dermatologist where she can fix your scars. You got to get them when you have the stitches, and then she's amazing and makes them go away. So she has over 20 years of experience as a board-certified dermatologist. She specializes in aesthetic dermatology and skin cancer with a focus on cosmetic treatments. She practices here in Huntington and is also an attending physician for medicine and dermatology at Huntington Hospital, Northwell Health. She completed her medical school training at Nassau University Medical Center. She's completed dual residencies and obtained dual board certifications in pediatrics and dermatology. She's an amazing doctor and someone I'm lucky enough to call my friend. Let me introduce to you Dr. Phyllis Smith.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to speak, Susan. A lot of what I was going to say, Meghan already put so aptly. So I'm Dr. Smith. This is Jill Brown, nurse practitioner in my office. We both do skin cancer screenings. First of all, kudos to all of you who braved the weather tonight. It is admirable. So Susan asked me to come and speak to you a little bit about skin cancer and how best to prevent it. Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer. There are 3 well-known forms of skin cancer. There are others, but I'm not going to address those, just the ones that dermatologists tend to diagnose and treat most frequently. I'm going to talk about a few others just for your information. So basal cells, most common, slow-growing, typically least aggressive. Squamous cell can arise very rapidly, can also be quite serious, can spread and metastasize. And melanoma, which is the most aggressive, accounts for 1% of skin cancers. It causes a large majority, however, of skin cancer deaths, which has been addressed. The rates of melanoma have been on the rise consistently over the last 30 years. In the U.S., approximately 87,000 new melanomas will be diagnosed, around 52,000 in men and 35,000 in women. Around 9,730 people are expected to die of melanoma in 2017. Of those people, 6,380 are men and 3,350 are women. The risk does increase with age. Key to the best outcome, as you've heard, is early detection with skin cancer checkups and self-examination. Patients ask me all the time, what's the best age to get started with your screenings? It's not written in stone. I had a 4-year-old with melanoma years ago. Although skin cancers are commoner in fair-skinned people with light eyes and freckles, no one is exempt, as you heard Bob Marley. A common misconception is that skin cancer only appears where the sun shines. Not true. You can get skin cancer, as you heard, in the eyes. You can get it in your mouth, which is why when you go to the dentist, a gauze is placed on your tongue, and your dentist will move your tongue around, and what they're looking for is skin cancer. You can get skin cancer in your scalp, between your toes. So it's a good idea when you go to the hairdresser or go to the barber that you mention something to the hairdresser. Take a look around, because you're going to see the hairdresser or barber more frequently than you see your dermatologist typically. Melanoma can arise within pre-existing moles, but most commonly arise de novo. They can pop out where there's no pre-existing moles. So what are you supposed to do with this information? It's important to keep a close eye on your skin. Check once a month. If you're married, have a fiance or a parent, let them check your back, you check theirs. Your legs, your arms, anything that's new or changing, or any of the ABCDEs that you heard about, keep a close eye. The one issue I have with the D, diameter, greater than the size of a pencil eraser, melanomas can start very, very small. I mean, you could have a lesion that's a millimeter, which is really tiny, which can be a melanoma. So that criteria I have a bit of an issue with. I think if something is very dark or getting a little bit bigger, it's a good idea to have it checked out, even if it doesn't fit all the criteria. If you have a history of blistering sunburns, especially during childhood and teens, a lifetime of outdoor sun exposure, or a family history of melanoma especially puts you at greater risk. If your pediatrician is concerned about a mole in a young child, it's important to have it evaluated. Best form of prevention is to avoid sunlight between the hours. You read different things everywhere, but anywhere from 10 to 2 to 10 to 4. My husband was coaching softball at 6:15 in the evening and came home with a sunburn on the nape of his neck. So it's important always to apply your sunscreen a half hour before you leave the house, reapply it every 2 hours. Wide-brimmed hats are advisable. The ears need to be protected. The lips need to be protected with a good sunblock. And it's, again, important to have that your scalp is covered. Sun is also reflected off concrete, off sand, and off water. So if you're sitting under an umbrella at a beach, if you happen to be at a beach, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I think it's fine going to the beach. I don't have an issue with that. I don't believe in people sitting in their homes if that's something they enjoy doing. People like golfing. It's important to moderate. I think moderation is terribly important. The higher, with sunscreen, the higher the better, 30 to 50. Now, I read recently even 100 is not a bad idea. Always wear sunglasses and protect the ears, the dorsal feet, the hands, and there's also clothing that you can get that protects you from sun. Ultimately, early detection and treatment are key in attaining the best outcome for patients. Are there any questions?
When you put sunscreen on, when you go into the pool or beach, and you go in the water, does it wash off?
It does. Good question. You go in the water, so you put the sunscreen on a half hour before you leave the house. Typically, you reapply every 2 hours. If you go in the water, you need to reapply. If you towel off, you need to reapply. If you're sweating, you need to reapply. So that 2-hour rule doesn't always hold. You know, it really depends on your activity. If you're playing golf or tennis and you sweat, reapply earlier. You don't have to wait the 2 hours.
Quick question. Did you mention a laundry detergent?
No, Megan.
That has a sunscreen in it?
Yes, I believe it's called Sun Shield. But if you just Google SPF in detergent, laundry detergent, there's a variety of different brands that come up. And then the other thing that both the doctor and myself had mentioned is also UPF protective clothing. So you can actually purchase clothing that has a higher level SPF in it as well. So there's two options. Oh, sure. Whoops.
I have two questions actually for the doctor. My dermatologist told me about this, some kind of, I don't know what it's called, but there's a new procedure where you go in and they take, in addition to going for regular checkups, they take pictures.
Yeah.
And then they follow up. So that's one question.
Not everybody has that, but yes, you can. That is something that can be done. You can have photos taken and be evaluated that way.
That's in conjunction with also going for regular checkups, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the other question is, I've had some relatives that have had things taken off with Mohs surgery. I've had a bunch taken off close to melanoma, knock on wood, thankfully not. But I asked my dermatologist during one visit, I said, what about Mohs surgery? And she said, no. Is it just two different ways of doing it? Is there something else?
Agreed. There are some institutions that do something called slow Mohs for melanoma, but the concept is if you're removing a basal cell, if you're removing a squamous cell, if you just get a narrow margin and you clear it, patient's cured. With melanoma, so that's what, and the whole concept behind Mohs surgery is skin sparing. So you want to leave as much healthy skin and just take the cancer out, and that's what Mohs surgery does. With melanoma, there's always a concern about satellotosis. In other words, you can have a skip area, and you can have a satellite lesion. In other words, a tiny little, where you may have a clear area. So if you just take a very narrow margin, it could actually, melanoma cells can actually skip over that, and you may miss those cells. So you need to take a decent margin. And what's a decent margin? It really depends upon the depth of the melanoma. So if it's an in situ or a low-grade melanoma, a 5 millimeter margin on each side of the clinical lesion is typically adequate. If it's a deeper melanoma, a thicker melanoma, then you're going to need larger margins. So you're going to have a larger scar than you would with Mohs surgery, but it's life-saving.
I wanted to know how much sunscreen you're supposed to put on, because I know sometimes, like my grandkids or my husband would just put a little dab and say, I put it on, you know?
About an ounce, a palmful.
Or a shot glass size worth. That's what we always use. Not for the high school students. But.
If you've had multiple other cancers, does it put you at a higher risk for melanoma? That's good to know.
The answer is yes. For a multitude of reasons, for a number of reasons. Number one of the reasons people get skin cancer is sun or tanning salons. Another reason is there are other factors. It's not only sun. Genetics plays a role in melanoma, in other skin cancers, and the environment plays a role, although that's not quite as well defined, but the environment sort of has some sort of role there. And there are other as yet unknown factors. So it's not just, as you heard, you know, Bob Marley toe, you know, there's other. So.
What's the shelf life on an open bottle and an unopened bottle of sunscreen?
Okay, so when you buy sunscreen, you should look at the bottom and check the date. on the bottom. There should always be an expiration date. I would toss it. I would toss it.
Could you just repeat last year's, is what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, there is typically an expiration date. So you should always make sure you should buy sunscreen that's got an expiration date, because you don't know how long it's been sitting on a shelf before it's sold to you.
Yeah. How do you feel about the Effidex treatment?
About Effidex?
Yes.
I'm a fan. I think it's a great form of field. It's not pleasant to go through, but it's a great form of what we call field therapy, because if you have the question is about treating precancers. Effidex, you're asking me about precancers or a skin cancer? Okay, it's absolutely not a treatment for melanoma. It's absolutely not a treatment for aggressive squamous cell carcinoma. Very, very low-grade squamous cell carcinoma with good follow-up, Effidex can work. I like it sometimes in combination with another product called imiquimod. Effidex for solar keratoses, if you have a lot of them, is a really good choice, because it treats not only the isolated lesions, but you're treating background lesions that you can't see, that are underneath the skin, that will probably come out in the future. And solar keratoses have an increased risk of turning into skin cancer, so it's preventive, and prevention is always best bet.
Thank you again.
There's phototherapy is another. Okay. You mean PDT?
Yes.
Yeah, that's another, yeah.
Okay, we all know that sunscreen, some are good, some are bad. When I go to buy a sunscreen, what is the main ingredient I should be looking for? Is it zinc?
Zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, micronized, nice and fine, so it don't need to see white on your face or your body, but you want that combination. And the nice thing about those is they're physical blockers, not chemical blockers, so they're safer. And for babies, yeah, zinc oxide is in baby diaper ointment, so yeah.
And make sure UVA and UVB, which is rare to find one that's not, but it's always helpful just to make sure it says UVA and UVB. It's protecting from both types of rays.
Thank you guys very much. Please give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, I want to thank all our speakers today. In closing, I just want to. All right, I want to thank all our speakers today. In closing, I just want to pick up on a couple of things when Dr. Smith was talking about and others were talking about checking your scalp. I had a nice chunk taken out of mine, which Dr. Smith found in, her regular, examination of me. But when you go to your hairdresser, if you're getting hair color or if you're getting cut, talk to your person and ask them if they see anything, if you're not going to, get a regular checkup, or make sure that whatever dermatologist you're seeing for your annual checkup definitely checks your scalp. And for all the young people really out there watching, your skin is so important, and like everybody was saying, you can't undo the damage that you've done. So now when I go out, I always have a hat, I always have a scarf around my neck, I do wear the UVB 50 clothes. When I'm at the beach, I'm dressed in, a long sleeve UVB 50 swim jacket and long sleeve and long UVB 50 pants and my hat, and I go in the water and all of that. People think I'm scuba diving, but no, I'm just wearing UVB 50 clothing, and I take every precaution possible, and yet I still go in and get something removed. And it's from all of the damage that I had done as a kid. So if we, start our kids, with the prevention now, then we can stop them from, suffering later on. I do want to mention again, I had a pilot program at Crab Meadow Beach where we have a dispenser of SPF 30 organic sunscreen lotion, which we got from the Melanoma Foundation. And I'm going to be installing that again when the beach opens up. And I'd really like some feedback from people. You know, the naysayers out there that said, well, you know, people should be responsible for themselves and bring their own sunscreen to the beach. Well, okay, all well and good. But for those people who might forget, you know, I think we should give them a little squirt of suntan lotion, sunscreen lotion. I think that everybody in the town of Huntington deserves a squirt of sunscreen lotion. And I am willing to provide it to them. So there you go. Okay. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming. The moral of the story tonight: be careful when you go outside, wear your sunscreen, reapply your sunscreen, wear your hat, wear some glasses, and don't go to the tanning booth. No matter how much you want to, no matter how good you think you might look in pictures, trust me, you can get a tan from a bottle and look even better. So thank you all very much for coming. We do have some giveaways in the back of the room from the Melanoma Foundation, from Long Island Cares. Dr. Smith has some giveaways, and we have Melissa back there from the Senior Center. Thank you all so much for coming, and please take care of your skin and stay safe.